We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Friday, January 17th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Joining us today is Brooke Prince.
Hello, happy to be here.
Happy Friday. And Lee Won-bin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So it's Friday, time to explore topics that resonate with young people around the world. And today we're going to talk about the rise in people living alone, a trend that's reshaping lifestyles not only here in Korea, but around the world. So according to the latest data from Statistics Korea, there were 7.83 million single-person households last year, accounting for 35.5% of all households here in the country. And this is the highest since data collection began in 2015. But it's not just here in Korea, this shift is happening globally. So I want to start off with a really light and simple question. Do you live alone? Starting with you, Brooke.
Yes, I am technically a single person household, but I do live with my cat, and he is like my child. So there is that, yes. I have lived independently from my family since I was 18 years old, which is pretty common for Americans. I know in Korea, it's a little bit different. People tend to live with their families for longer, sometimes even until they get married. But in America, we do tend to flee the nest at 18. I left and I moved to Los Angeles all by myself, and I had roommates all through college. Then I moved to Korea, and I finally was able to live by myself. And I've been doing that for the last 8 years or so, and I find that I really enjoy it. I'm what they say in Korean, 완전 I. I am the
introvert?
Yes, the introvert of the MBTI. I really enjoy my alone time, and I find having that safe private space to recharge to be so important to me. Plus, it's nice not having a roommate because no one has to fight over the thermostat.
Right.
You can watch whatever you want whenever you want. You can decorate your space how you like to. Don't have to have any visitors unless you want them. You basically just get to live on your own terms.
Right.
And that's why I really like living alone.
You have the full space to yourself.
Yes.
Right. So Brooke lives alone. I'm currently living with my parents. What about you, Won-bin?
I am living alone as well. I started to live apart from my family when I moved to Canada to study in high school. And currently I'm living alone in Korea as well. I'm living near my work to reduce commute time. And living alone, I gotta say, I'm sorry to mom and dad, but I'm loving it. One of the biggest perks and the benefits from living alone is definitely the freedom that you get in many ways, especially when you're not only physically independent, but you're financially independent from your family as well, which means you're paying the rent and every expenses like the food and everything, the utilities as well. This means that you are basically a completely different independent entity from your parents or your family, and it allows you to make your independent decisions on your own at your own responsibility. And one thing that I really want to add on to this is that compared to the previous generation, I feel like youngsters nowadays, so the MZ generations, are more looking forward to live alone, and it's becoming more of like a dream thing that many people in their 20s dream of. And I think it's because compared to the past, about 30, 40 years ago, Korea as a country is now more developed, it's more stable, compared to the past where there were many constructions and changes of cities and infrastructures. So I think that's the reason why people are really wanting to live alone nowadays. And it definitely is an ongoing trend within Korea.
Right, and we're going to talk about the reasons a bit later in our episode. But just by looking at us here in the studio, 2 out of 3 are living by themselves, which really shows that this is becoming a huge trend among our generation. And also building on the stats that I mentioned earlier in the first part of our episode, it is a fact that our generation is making up a significant share of these people living alone. So Brooke, could you please tell us or break down the numbers for us?
Sure, I certainly can. According to the 2024 statistics on single-person households released by Statistics Korea, the number of single-person households now constitutes the largest proportion among all household types. Looking further into this data, those aged 70 and over, as you can see on this chart, accounted for the largest share of single-person households at 19.1%, followed closely by individuals in their 20s at 18.6%, those in their 60s and 30s both at 17.9%, 17.3%, then people in their 50s at 15.1%, and finally those in their 40s at 12.6%. So the MZ generation really does take up quite a big portion.
Right.
Now, if you're wondering where these people are located, regionally, 47.7%, or nearly half of all single-person households in the country reside in the Seoul metropolitan area. They also looked into the reasons why people want to live alone. The first one is a sad one. It's the death of a spouse is the first reason why people end up living alone. The second was personal study or work. And the other was just simply the desire to live alone. People like me who just enjoy having that space. And I think overall what you can take from all of this data is that, yes, we have an aging population, we have the low birth rate. Those are contributing to this trend. But I also think that there's a cultural shift. I think the young generation is now prioritizing their personal freedom and their career development over getting married and having a family. And I think that's why we're seeing a big rise in single-person households.
Definitely. So Brooke showed us a big picture showing that more than 1/3 of people who are living alone here in Korea are part of our generation, those in their 20s and 30s. Then Wonbin, in your first answer, you briefly mentioned some of the possible reasons why more young people are choosing to live alone. Could you provide us some more reasons?
Of course I can. So I think one of the biggest reasons of why single-person households are increasing is the social perception of we see them. In the past, living alone often came with a negative label or a tag such as 노총각 or 노처녀, which basically means an unmarried old man or woman. But nowadays it's seen as a personal choice, and it is respected as a valid lifestyle. Some shifts in trend do also back this phenomenon up. Again, back to the changing perception, if we rewind just about 30 to 40 years ago, having unity as like a nation was considered as a very important matter, such as having the same haircuts, school uniforms, and if we go back a little bit more into the 80s, there's countrywide curfews set by law as well. And nowadays, individualism is the new norm, unlike the past. People are welcome to express their uniqueness and style via fashion, lifestyle, hobbies, and many different methods. And living alone is just an extension, or I think it could even be the final form of individualism, because it gives you a private, safe space that is just yours and only yours.
Right, so it's not just longer life expectancies or an aging population, but at least among our generation, I think that perception, a change in perception and values is playing a key role in more people opting to live alone. Now, expanding our discussion, we also asked our viewers whether they prefer living alone or with others, such as their families, their friends, or partners. So let's take a look at their responses. So we conducted this survey through our Arirang.News YouTube channel. It was conducted between January 9th to 15 among the 563 votes that our viewers gave to the question, what's your preferred living arrangement? Alone, said 64% chose alone, while 36% chose with others. Let's take a look at some of the opinions. Rahina Saka 7004 says, I choose to live alone. Living with others can be very nice, but when your way of living does not match their way of living with them starts to become hard. Jen Jack Sky says, no man is an island. We are social beings. I love my family, and living with family is the best human experience there is for me. Moonha says, living alone allows me to focus on myself and my goals better. I find peace in solitude and freedom from unnecessary conflicts. So by looking at the poll results that was voted by our viewers, we can see that more than half of them chose to live alone. So we're now going to broaden our discussion even more and examine how this trend is playing out in other parts of the world. So could you start us off, Wonbin?
Absolutely. This rising trend in single-person households is not a situation just in Korea. It's a global phenomenon. Let's take a look. In Sweden, over 56% of households consist of individuals living alone, which is easily more than half. And similarly, Denmark, Finland, and Germany all surpassed 40% as of 2018, and assuming it'll be higher in 2025. It shows how this trend is happening is reshaping lifestyle not only in Korea, but globally around the world, regardless of continent, regions, or culture.
So we've talked about Europe. Let's now focus on other continents. Let's first start with your home country, the States, Brooke.
Certainly. So in 2023, about 38.1 million households in the U.S. were single-person households. And this was a record high, representing nearly 30% of all households in the country. So about 1 in 3 people that you meet is living alone. The number of people living alone has increased each decade in the U.S. since 1940, and it's more than tripled since that time. I read that it was around 8% then, which is a huge difference.
Right.
And this has also been attributed to similar reasons that we've been talking about with Korea. People are living longer and the birth rate as well, but the cultural shift is also happening in the U.S. It's shifting towards being more career focused and self-sufficient. And what does that mean? People are going to get married later because they're focused on their jobs and getting their financial means ready to have a child. Looking closer to Korea, in Japan, 34% of households were single-person households in 2023, making it the most common household type there. So clearly, as we've been saying, this is not just something that's happening in Korea. There is a global shift happening towards single-person households.
Definitely. So single-person households are becoming more widespread globally. So to delve deeper into why more people around the world are choosing to live alone, we'll soon be joined by a Gen Z from Finland after this break.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang.News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Well, today we're pleased to be joined by Nina Rustet, a Gen Z from Finland. Welcome, Nina, to the show.
Hi, and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, Nina, we first want to ask you, our panelists earlier mentioned that Europe has a significant proportion of single-person households. So we want to ask you, are you currently living by yourself, and are you noticing this trend among people around you?
Yes, I've been living alone for around 5 years for my studies, and I do see this trend being fairly common among my friends, especially those who live in bigger cities.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm curious, why do you think more young people are choosing to live alone, like you mentioned?
As you mentioned before, the trend to live alone, I think it reflects both societal and economic changes. And there is a growing emphasis on self-reliance and personal freedom for young people. And many people also prefer to focus on their studies or career before committing to long-term relationships or family life. And I'd also say that urbanization plays a role, as living alone is often seen as the more practical choice in cities since the opportunities are concentrated there. And in addition, in Finland, we have a social welfare system that includes different kinds of aids that make living independently more viable.
Right, absolutely. So like you said, living alone definitely has a lot of benefits and advantages compared to the traditional methods. Then are there any specific support systems or policies in Finland that cater to single-person households? And what additional support measures do you think would be helpful and beneficial for people living alone?
Well, we have several policies, and first of all, we have what we call a general housing allowance. So it helps cover rent costs based on the income and living situation. Then we have a social assistance financial aid for people who struggle to meet basic ends like rent or food. And then specifically for students, we have a student allowance, like a monthly allowance given to students. And then there are specific organizations that provide more affordable student housing. And what comes to new measures that could be taken, I'd say that increasing affordable housing options would be a good choice, since many urban areas, especially in Europe these days, they are experiencing a shortage in single-person housing. So building or renovating more compact and energy efficient apartments would be beneficial. And then some kind of tax benefits perhaps for people living alone might be useful to alleviate the financial pressure of living alone. And then lastly, I'd say that some kind of intervention programs to battle possible loneliness, since you might feel lonely when you're living alone, that could improve mental health for sure.
Couldn't agree with you more. All right, Nina, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts today, and hope you have a nice weekend.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, so with factors like an aging population, longer life expectancy, delayed marriages, and more people prioritizing career or studying, single-person households are projected to rise. For example, in South Korea, it's estimated that by 2052, over 40% of households will be single-person, which we're already witnessing in certain countries in Europe. So what challenges do you think these households might face?
There definitely are some challenges compared to the traditional methods of living. Single-person households are often left in vulnerable spots when it comes to welfare and institutional or government supports. They're more likely to experience weak social connections and financial stability. In fact, some studies show that the income of single-person households is only about 45% of the average for all households. And on top of that, and most importantly, 7 out of 10 people who are living alone does not own their own house, including myself.
And me as well.
And one thing, kind of connecting to this and building on top of what Nina said in her interview, I feel like the rent price, the increasing price of rent could be a really big problem because, as she said, there's a shortage of houses that a single person can live, and the demand will continuously increase, and that naturally makes the price of rent go up. And people who are living alone are mostly young people, people in their 20s and 30s, who are most often struggling financially compared to the other age ranges. So I think this is definitely another challenge that people could face.
Right, and although we are facing skyrocketing inflation, our income isn't really increasing that much. And also for single-person households, they're definitely earning less than most double-income households.
Yes.
So definitely single-person households, people they could face these financial burden, and also, as Nina mentioned, loneliness as well. So to address some of these challenges, Brooke, I heard that new initiatives are being introduced in Korea this year.
That's right. And I want to say our guest, Nina, she really had some fantastic points about how we can address these issues. And I think the policy reflects a lot of the things that she was talking about. With the steady rise of single-person households, the city of Seoul is implementing customized measures like what she mentioned to improve their quality of life and help to solve the health, safety, and housing problems that they might face. So to that end, the government is operating various programs to help people network and meet each other so they can alleviate that isolation and loneliness that can be caused by living alone. So they provide opportunities to enjoy things like hobbies and cultural activities together. They also help them to find employment and start businesses, because I do think if you're living alone, you need to find a lot of personal fulfillment, and working is a part of that. But I would say one of the biggest concerns about this many people living alone is their mental health and the potential for that social isolation to lead to very unfortunate outcomes like lonely deaths, which we've seen a lot of headlines about. So in order to prevent this, local governments like Seongnam City, for example, are providing free psychological and emotional support to these households. And the Seoul government is also implementing new policies that should help as well. For example, currently depression tests in general health checkups are conducted every 10 years. But starting this year, they are changing that. Young people aged 20 to 34 will be able to receive mental health tests every 2 years instead when they receive their general health checkups. And I was really, I was very encouraged to see this policy, because I think that mental health is something that could stand to be talked about more in Korea and prioritized more. So I hope that these policies will make a positive impact and make people in these single-person households feel a lot more supported by their community, because just because you're living alone doesn't mean you don't have people around you, right?
Right. I mean, it's great to hear these initiatives and these changes, because it's not just financial support that's really important, but it's also I think the point here is making people who live alone feel that they're included in the society and they're connected with each other. So ending off our episode today, traditionally, as we mentioned earlier, living with family, friends, or partners was sort of like the norm in Korea. But as we move into an era where living alone is more common, how can we better prepare for this change in society?
Well, as I was researching for this show, I read a quote that said, "This is not a trend, it's a transformation." So I think it's important to remember that this rise in single-person households, it's not a fad that's going to just fade away and drastically go back to how it was overnight. I think these single-person households are here to stay.
Right.
I think we are going to see them continue to be a large segment of the population, which means that social policy needs to be adjusted and tailored. We need to move away from policy that is focused only on the family unit, that traditional household, and also include other more diverse households as well. And I want to say another important thing is to destigmatize the idea of living alone. Wonbin mentioned it earlier, there used to be negative terms about this. And so we need to really respect people's decisions, because a lot of people like myself voluntarily choose to live alone and enjoy it. So we should respect how everyone chooses to live.
Right, it's just an option or a way that you choose to live, single-person households.
Exactly.
What do you think, Wonbin?
I couldn't agree more with Brooke. I think she did a very good job just wrapping up our whole conversation. Just some things that I want to add is that I feel like this trend could be a critical turning point for the low birth rate in Korea. Currently, Korea is in trouble for having a very low birth rate.
Right.
The last time I checked, it was below 0.7.
One of the lowest in the world.
Lowest in OECD countries, yes. And people living alone and everybody living separately just naturally is not an ideal environment for people to get married together, settle down, and have kids, which leads to lower marriage rates, which naturally makes lower birth rate as well. And without proper support and benefit from the government and changing the social perception, it can easily accelerate the decreasing trend of the birth rates. Therefore, I genuinely think that there should be changes in both ways, like Brooke said, from the government and the society as well. So I think it is a good change that must happen in the long-term future.
Right, so hope we can see a society where single-person households are more accepted naturally in the future. And that's all from us today, but Newsden will be back next Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Brooke Prince.
Thank you. Have a great Friday.
You too, and Yeonbin.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for watching, and hope you have a lovely weekend. We are
News Generation.